Now, every week at this time, we turn our attention to key issues affecting our planet. And this week on Climate Critical, we're looking to the oceans. Now, it's taken 5 years, but both the EU and the US have now signed up to the United Nations Clean Seas campaign, which amounts to a commitment to end plastic pollution. That announcement came at the UN Oceans Conference on Friday, and it's quite a commitment. It means that with other new countries joining them, nearly 80% of the world's coastlines are covered by that deal. At the same time, though, a recent report by the OECD, that's the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, throws cold water over any hopes that the problem might ever be overcome, because it claimed that even if the so-called plastic tap is turned off today, plastic stocks in the ocean would in fact triple by 2060. Well, I'm joined now by two people engaged in the actual task of removing that plastic. Elise is head of international communications for the SeaCleaners based in Paris, and Joel Baziuk is associate director at Global Ghost Gear Initiative, joining us from White Rock in British Columbia. Ghost gear, that's the name given to the vast amount of discarded fishing gear in the ocean. Joel, we'll come to that in just a moment. I did want to start with you, Elise, because you deal with what for most people is the sort of classic perception of plastic rubbish in the ocean. The hard fact is it's being dumped in far more and faster than you can possibly scoop it out again. What is the purpose of your mission?
Okay, good morning, David. Thank you for inviting us to the show. Well, actually, the SeaCleaners is a French association founded in 2016, and we have 4 missions. We reduce plastic pollution at its source through raising awareness and educating. We collect plastic waste at sea and on land. We contribute to scientific research, and we encourage movement towards a circular economy.
Right. Just let me ask you on that. Sorry to interrupt you already, but let me ask you on the scooping up of the plastic, the taking it out of the sea.
Yeah.
I think we've got some pictures of a prototype vessel that you will hope to have in action fairly soon.
Yes.
What does that do to help? I don't mean to be crude about it, but it is such a vast reservoir of waste, and 1 or 2 vessels is not going to change that.
No, but we actually, when this giant boat called the Manta, it's a giant catamaran, will be launched in 2025, we will show the plan in open data. So any country can build this boat, and 300 boats if the country wants, but it's supposed to be an ambassadorship. It's actually powered with renewable energies, with sails, obviously, but with turbines, hydro generators, photovoltaic solar panels, and it also runs with plastic waste. We will eat the plastic waste, like the manta ray eats the plankton, and we will transform this marine plastic waste into energy on board.
Right.
So we are not saying that we are the solution.
No, but you want that to scale up. Yeah.
Exactly. We are part of the solution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Joel, let me turn to you, because ghost gear, as you call it, fishing gear, discarded by fishing fleets across the world. I mean, I saw the figure that up to 70%, at least in weight, of plastic waste in the ocean is coming from fishing gear. I mean, that's a staggering figure.
Yeah, it's 70%, up to 70% in the gyres specifically, so rather than the ocean at large. But still, it's between about half to that, based on best estimates right now. We actually don't know exactly how much is out there, but it's a massive amount by mass. And one thing I'd like to point out as well is that there's a common misconception that fishers are just throwing gear over the side of their boats. Really, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons for that gear loss, and I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, fishing's not a fair weather industry, so it can get lost due to snags beneath the surface, rough weather, other vessels coming into contact with it and not realizing
Presumably some of it is actually just discarded by illegal fishers when they're under threat.
Certainly, illegal fishing is a significant contributor too, but again, quantifying the amount of illegal fishing is difficult. So quantifying the amount of dumped gear by illegal fishers is also very difficult to quantify. And sometimes where there are no end of life disposal options for fishers for gear, because again, some of these nets can weigh 20,000 pounds. where there are no end-of-life solutions, then they either end up on land stored for significant amounts of time, or they can be discarded. But that's less common than the general common causes of gear loss, or rough weather and snags and interaction with other gear and those types of things.
Can I ask you then, what is the climate implication of all this? I mean, the programme is climate critical. We're talking about waste at the moment. Can you give us enlighten us a bit, Joel?
Sure, it's an excellent question, and it's a good lead-in, actually, because although I don't think you can make a claim that losing fishing gear is causing climate change directly, certainly not the way that some other things are. But the opposite is very much true. As climate change begins to create increased intensity of storm systems, particularly in areas like the Caribbean, where we're doing a project right now, those increased storm systems are causing more gear loss, because the fishers with deployed traps or fish pots or things like that out there, those intense storm systems can cause them to become lost, separated from their buoys, where they will then they will remain in the ocean, where they can continue to trap species in a cyclic manner over and over again. So that's one of the main links between lost gear and climate change, is that as we get more intense weather, we get more gear loss.
I mean, you two have a common purpose here, which is about cleaning up the oceans, but in very different tracks in a way. And I wonder, Elise, what is your motivation for the work you're doing? What are you actually trying to achieve?
Well, actually, we know that 6 facts affecting global warming are correlated to the life of plastic. So actually, we have to move on this. So extraction and production, consumption, end of life, recycling and closing the loop, because also recycling can significantly reduce the environmental impact of plastic pollution and its contribution to climate change. Less than 10% of plastic used around the world is recycled. So we are part of the solution. There's also the marine pollution. Every minute, the equivalent of a skip full of plastic is dumped into the ocean. So we have to do something. So Global Gear Initiative at its level, the SeaCleaners at its level, but we all have to do something.
Right.
And there's also this...
And I just want, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, Elise, we're getting a bit short for time. Joel, the same question to you, really. What's the motivation? I mean, yes, it's great to get rubbish out of the sea, but isn't there more to it than that?
There's a lot more to it than that. I mean, 5 years ago, I don't think that this was on the agenda. I mean, the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, or the Triple GI as we call it, is about the same vintage as the SeaCleaners. We launched in 2015. But now, as you mentioned, the UK government, one of our 20 member governments, through the OECD, produced that report on ghost gear last year in their G7 presidency. It's really hit the top of the global plastics policy and the global policy list. And I think that at the Triple GI, we do some removal gear, and a lot of our 132 member organizations around the world do removal as well. But it's also about prevention and education and making sure honestly, gear is difficult to find once it's been lost. The ocean's a big place. If you can prevent it from getting there in the first place, you're doing a lot more harm, a lot more good. So we work across prevention, mitigation, and remediation or removal.
You've probably, between you, got the most high-profile issue in terms of pollution in the oceans, because I think many people see the high seas as the poor relation in terms of climate change and efforts to mitigate and deal with that. But let me ask you, Elise, that figure from the OECD, that there'll be 3 times the amount of plastic waste in the seas by 2060, even if there's no more plastic ever produced. Do you think that's realistic? Can you do anything about that?
Well, regarding our mission, if we are realistic about this?
Yeah, precisely.
Yes, of course. Well, it's a real, it's a global ecological disaster. So we all have to do something one more time. 1.5 million animals die each year because of plastic pollution. 1 million birds die each year. So, and what about humans? We ingest the equivalent of 1 credit card a week.
Wow. Well,
because of plastic, through food, water consumption, breathing.
Elise, I'm sorry to stop you, but we have to stop there. Elise and Joel Baziuk, thank you both very much indeed.